Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas. It's The Stacks Book Club Day, and we are discussing our very first graphic memoir on the show. The book is The Best We Could Do by T. Bowie, and our guest to help us break down this book is herself the author of a critically acclaimed graphic memoir, Good Talk. She is also a novelist and cultural critic. It is the brilliant Mira Jacob. Our conversation focuses on history, family, and the permissions we are given from our parents. There are no spoilers on today's episode. Please be sure to listen to the end of the episode to find out what our August book club pick will be. If you love the show and want to support my work in creating it every single week, please consider joining the Stacks Pack on Patreon. You earn perks like our monthly book club, where we discuss the Stacks Book Club picks in detail and get shout outs on the show and more. Plus, you earn my undying gratitude because your monthly contribution makes this show possible. Truly, there's no The Stacks without the Stacks Pack. If you want to join, please head over to patreon.com/thestacks. I realize I say this every single week, but I never spell it. That's patreon.com/thestacks. Now, a little thank you to our newest members: Tiffany Douglas, Samantha E. Anderson, Kiali, Courtney Burgess, and Shannon Weeks. Truly, the show does not exist without you all and the wildly generous humans that make up the Stacks Pack. Now it's time for our spoiler-free discussion of The Best We Could Do by T. Bowie with the brilliant Mira Jacob for the Stacks Book Club. All right, everybody, we are back. It's the Stacks Book Club Day. We've brought back the wonderfully, incredibly, talentedly, I've added a lot of Lees, but just the wonderful, amazing Mira Jacob. Mira, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
And everyone, we are talking about The Best We Could Do by T. Bowie, which is a graphic memoir, another graphic book, our first ever on the podcast. So let me just be really straightforward. I may sound like a fucking idiot because I don't know anything about this genre. I have read a total of 3 books that are graphic, and I've read all 3 of them within 2 weeks of each other. So congratulations.
Amazing. But also, let's just say that one of the most incredible things about graphic books is you don't have to be an expert in them. Like you just talk about what moves you or what's interesting to you or how it works. We don't have to be experts. We just have to be able to say what it is about this book, which is so amazing. And I've got many things to say about that.
Okay. So let's start. I always start here. Very generally, what did you think of the book?
Okay. I will tell you that the first time I read this book, I tore through it, probably read it I swallowed it. It was like maybe like 2 hours of just reading. And then I realized at the end I was bereft and immediately turned it over and started reading it again. I found this book to be so astonishing because it was showing me things that I hadn't really seen before. Just to describe this book a little bit for the viewers at home. So the T. Bowie's drawings are, they're basically black and white drawings, and she takes this one color of almost a reddish brown that she thins out. Sometimes it looks like dried blood. Sometimes it looks like an orange sky. She just does all the tones that one color can do, and it's always kind of this beautiful watercolor that floats through the drawing, and it touches different parts of the drawing, and it draws your eyes to different things. So sometimes it's a shadow on the floor, and sometimes it's a little bit of a cloud, and sometimes it's the way that a certain wave is going to curl up and push the family forward as they were boat people. She talks about that, about the fact that they made their escape from Vietnam. And so this book to me was talking about a time that I was not totally, I was, really young in the early 70s, and I understood something had happened with Vietnamese people because of the way that they were being spoken about around me. And this was like a missing piece of a puzzle told by the person I most needed to hear from.
I love that. Again, I'm new to graphic novels, so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get it. And the thing is that, like, I got it, and that's always such a good feeling. And that's how I felt about your book. Like, I got it. I'm not as dumb as I thought. Like, I could understand this thing. And I loved the way that the art and the history came together. For me, the history was just so interesting. I love history. Like, that's one of my favorite genres to read. That's one of my favorite things to think about, especially modern, like post-Civil War, especially things that have to do with war. So like this sort of fell in this place that I was not expecting to love so much.
This is very exciting. I'm like, this hit all your sweet spots.
It really did. And in a way, like, and I wasn't expecting that because I was like, oh, I'm nervous about graphic novel, right? Like, I'm nervous about the genre. And so what if it doesn't work for me? And it totally did. And what I found interesting is another genre that I love is memoir. And for some reason, the memoir I was less taken with. And I think that's because I was so overwhelmed by the way the history was done. I just loved that so much. And like, I had this thought of like, maybe is this book YA a little bit because of the way that she is teaching history in this really approachable way. And then I sort of walked that back because I don't think that it is. But I do think that there is this really approachable and understandable simplicity in this book that is what felt like YA to me. You know, like it was like this, I'm showing you something, I'm teaching you something, I'm explaining something in a way that maybe you've never had it taught, explained, shown to you. And I think that's what that was.
Yes.
And I like that. I like when when I think a book is good and adult and complex and also think, could this be YA? You know, like that's like a huge compliment. That's how I felt about Homegoing by Ya Jesse, is like, this could be YA. Like, I know there's heavy stuff in this, but like a 16-year-old could read this and have their world shifted. And that's really fucking cool. So that's sort of like my general take on the book. The thing that I will probably remember forever about this book is the very early pages where it's the whole history of Vietnam for like 150 years. And it's like takes up 2 pages and kind of like arcs around. And it's like this squiggly line of like, wow, I now understand what the fuck the Vietnam War was pretending to be about, because I watched that whole fucking Ken Burns documentary, and this 2-page thing, like, I was like, oh, I get it now. And that's like a real feat.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. You know, I think, so for me, one of the things that I found myself doing the second time, which was immediately after the first time, when I read this, was I realized how many of the images were telling a story that was slightly different than the words, right? And I had to go back and really just let the images in, because her images are complex. And they are dark and they're beautiful and they have these echoes. So like if you go to, I'm just going to describe pages for people because I feel like that's a fair thing to do. If you go to page 84, right?
Okay. Yes.
And she's talking about this kind of phenomenon that so many of us have been through, which is that she didn't know her father, right? And that there was a way in which he was really a kind of reticent man. He was not a nice man. And he wasn't like a warm man. And yet this was her father and this mystery of him. So if you go to page 85, you see this beautiful drawing of what looks like his body floating in water. And it says, Bo slept alone in his bed at night and practiced leaving his body. I practiced being brave. So it's this sort of connection that they have. And if you look at that picture and then you go a few pages ahead to page 90, you see this thing where she used to have a dream of, when she was asleep, she had a dream about being in her house, and her house was filled with water and she was paddling around in it. And you see her, again, a little girl's body floating in water, but it's encased by her house. And so like the kind of emotional work that happens in a moment like that.
Yeah.
I didn't get it the first time because I was pushing so fast to figure out what happened. But something like that is actually really, you know, that's like a really beautiful way to show what generational trauma looks like. And to like, let us hold it in our minds. And there were so many moments like that in this where I just thought, oh, you have this really simple thing happening on the page and I get all of it. And then right under that is something so heartbreaking and layered and deep. And it's almost like I can read every page of this book 15 times.
Yeah. I probably should read this book like 8 more times because you get the sense of like there's more here,
Oh, yeah.
like it just like that layered feeling. It's interesting that image of the father laying. I had imagined that as mountains, and I don't know why, but that's what I hadn't seen that as water.
Oh,
But who
it is.
knows? I could be either, but I just think that's also what's sort of great about the artwork in this book is that it's not abstract in any way, except for that there's lots of room for interpretation and like feeling. And, I also love that the artwork reminded me of a comic book. Like she has some of the faces have like the polka dots, like the comic book polka dots, like
Yes.
the shadowing or whatever. And I thought that was really cool because the actual drawings or watercolors themselves don't necessarily look like a traditional comic book, but some of the effects that are used did.
Yes.
And that was kind of a cool marriage of like these different styles and forms. And I think, probably you could like talk about, Vietnamese culture and American culture and like them being married in her artwork itself. And I just feel like this book was doing so much and so little at the same time, which is, again, like my favorite kind of compliment, like being like, this book is so much and so little.
So if you had to describe like, what is the propelling force in this book? Why did you keep reading?
For me, it was how is she going to explain the war and like her family's relationship to the war. And like, that was for me what I was most interested in and like most curious about. And when I got kind of to the end of the war, like once they left Vietnam, I think I lost a little bit of interest in the book. Like I was so concerned about Vietnam.
Yeah.
For me. What about you?
I read for the parental relationships.
Interesting.
I read for the spaces between the parents who met young, had ideas about each other, had very, very hard lives, and made this very daring escape, and were not close with each other, and were there for their children, but were not close to their children, which is a dynamic I'm very, very familiar with.
Yeah.
A South Asian. And I think my parents were sort of, I think my father was a really, really warm man. And so he sort of reset that tone in our family. But I've met so many of my friends that grew up with parents with these kind of unimaginable struggles, and the way that they live their lives, it's so hard. So many of them, it's so hard for them to create anything because they feel like they're wasting the chance that their parents gave them. They're not immediately making money or finding some way to provide incredible amounts of stability because the things that their parents went through were so awful and so destabilizing that to like take the time to draw a story, to take the time to sort of through how your emotional resonance with the story is going to show up in the watercolor of the page is to waste that time. So I was sort of, I'll also say to you, I also had this feeling when I was reading this because I was like, oh wow, I wonder how her family, I wonder how they took her talent. Did they celebrate her talent? Because she's phenomenally talented.
Yeah, she's insanely talented.
Every page of the book, you're just like, wow, your brain and your perspective and your drawings and everything, right? The most exciting thing about this book to me is that you never know what's going to happen on the next page in terms of layout. So it breaks the frame a lot. The watercolor crawls all over the page. You have no idea if you're going to be looking at something with tight panels or if it's just going to flow all the way across one page into another. And what you're going to see there is the counterpoint to that is you're seeing these very historically accurate scenes, right? So it's almost like watching a documentary with this kind of rush of feeling behind it. Anyway, when I was reading it, I found myself thinking a lot about how did she allow herself the freedom to write this? How did she allow herself the freedom to find this form? I'm so impressed by that.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed by wandering into this very fraught story of kind of the gaps in between the love you feel for your parents and the ways in which you're beholden to them, and then this entire history of a country that you don't return to. I'm so kind of impressed of how emotional that is, and how how it feels to me that she just let herself be herself as an artist. Yeah. This feels like the book of a fully realized artist, right? It doesn't feel like this is somebody's first memoir. It feels like, no. Oh, you've been doing this forever. You've written 7 of these. This is one of them.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a very, I don't know, mature, is that the right word to say? Mature book, like storytelling. Yeah. I wonder for you, because your first book was a novel, a traditional novel, and then your second book is this graphic memoir. And I'm wondering, as someone, you know, who was a writer all along, I mean, in your book, you talk about being a writer very early, like in college and after college, and trying to figure that out. And so I'm wondering, when you decided to make this graphic work, did you go and like read a bunch of graphic memoirs and graphic novels and things and be like, how does this work? Or did you just say like, I know how to tell a story and I'm just adding these other elements?
Definitely the second, but also just out of self-preservation, because I knew if I were to read a bunch of graphic novels, I'd get really scared about how much better everyone was, honestly. And I just had to limit the world rather than expand it. Right.
And so, since have you started reading more graphic novels?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not that I didn't read them before. I read them, but in the course of when I realized I was going to write one, and the 2 years that I wrote that book, I did not pick up any other work because I was afraid of, I know, like, I'm not the world's best illustrator. I'm reasonably good. My method is janky and funny and like a zine. It's not a beautifully produced thing. It is, you can feel the person slapping it together behind it. That feels important to me about the way that my work works. But it's not award-winning illustrative work, you know? And so I didn't want to scare myself with other people's talent. I just thought, yeah, they are. They're wildly talented. And you've also just got your story. You have to get it out the way that you can.
Yeah. It's such an interesting form, because I don't know, not most people, but a lot of people aren't good at both things, right? Like the art and the writing part, like the visual art and the writing part. And so I think it's really cool when it comes together and the writing and the art mesh and tell a story and it works together, because I haven't read very many, but I have to imagine there's probably some where the art is like, ooh, not great. Or the writing is like, ooh, not great. And I've read 3 and they've all been like really good. And so I'm like, maybe are they all just really good, or like I just have like good recommenders? I don't know. But
I do feel like if you can go into the space where I think there is something that's really exciting about graphic work, in that I do feel like people, because it's uncomfortable for them, just go with the uncomfortability rather than trying to control it and saying it should be this or it should be that. So I think that might be also part of it, is that you're not writing it to critique it. I mean, sorry, you're not reading it to critique it. You're not reading it and what all the boundaries are. So you can just enjoy it, which to me is like, yeah, man. Yeah. Like, that's one of your questions should be, what is the last book that you read that made you forget you were reading a book?
I don't even know what that means.
because I think there's a way in which when we are readers, we really do. We go through a lot of books. But sometimes you'll pick up something and you're not in a book anymore. You're in an alternate dimension. Yeah. You're with, true. You know what I mean? You're with a traveler that's telling you a thing and you're just following them.
Right. Right.
This is not just the tequila talking.
No. No, I do hear what you're saying. Like that sometimes a book can transcend like the reader in a way that you don't feel the obligation of the responsibility of reading it, sort of. Like, because when I read things, I go in like being like, okay, who would like this book? What does this mean? What is this in relationship to? Who would this be a good recommendation for? What's the lineage, you know? And so I do think like when I try a new form, or when I try something different and it's good, I get that sense. Like I just read Clint Smith's book of poetry, and I'm pretty new to poetry, but Counting Descent is so good. And it was one of those books where I was like, also Finna by Nate Marshall, both of those books. I was like, these are really, really good. And I don't have the language to really talk about them, so I can just sort of enjoy them. Whereas when I read a really good memoir, I mostly have the language to talk about it because I'm much more practiced. Yeah. So, and that's sort of my experience so far with graphic novel is like, I read 3. So it's your book, T's book, and then I read Displacement by Kiku Hughes.
Great.
which I liked. That one was my least favorite because that one felt the most like I'm teaching you about this moment in history, and I sort of felt like I know this moment in history pretty well because it falls into my post 1865 war, and so it just felt like a little remedial for me. It didn't have as much like creative retelling as T's book did, but still, like, reading those things, I'm gathering the language, and so when I do a new form, I feel like I'm able to remove my like reader, reviewer, podcaster, critic brain and able to just be like, I'm learning something, which is harder, I guess, for things that I feel more confident in reading or that I read more often.
Yes, no, that does make sense to me. And I also, I mean, the thing that I think is really interesting about this book in particular is the scope is really wild, right?
Yes.
Because it's got this, it's like this huge historical scope and then this very, very intimate family, right? These like very, very almost like whispered disappointments in each other.
Right.
And so it is, when people say something is actually dizzying in scope, like they're talking about books like this, books that give you the world and also like a teardrop on a leaf, you know, just this kind of way of relating to so many things that you have to expand to meet it.
Yeah. And I think we get that a lot more in movies, right? Where it's like, like something like Cold Mountain, where it's like this really tiny story inside this huge moment in history. And I think in books, for whatever reason, probably marketing, we'll blame marketing again, but books are either like huge books about history or they're small books about people. And so there's less, like, I think there are books that do it, but I think it's harder. It's harder to maybe sell a book that is covering vast swaths of history and these tiny intimate stories because it's like, who will read this? Who will read this book? It's like, everyone will read this fucking book if it's good, you know, like, but I do think in movies it's easier because just like graphic novel, you have that visual element. So you don't have to write every fucking sentence. You can just cut to a scene of a beach and it's like, I got it. I feel it. I'm here with you. Now what are the lovers doing or whatever?
You know what's really interesting about what you're saying? What's so interesting for me, the process of writing that book, I realized I would write, and then once I would put it down on a page, like get the visuals down, I would cut 80% of what I'd written because of the exact phenomenon that you're talking about. Because you see beach, you see this, and all of a sudden, all of your history comes to the page with me.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like we all have, there's like a shared visual. I mean, if you can see it, I mean, I think it's also true. Like if you could put a smell in a book like that, it would, other senses would work. It just, you can't do, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to assume that just being able to see, but in this medium, of course, it's about your eyes. But I think like when you hear a song, the same things happen.
Yeah.
And movies are able to do that too, where it's like, oh, I heard this song and you're like, oh shit, I know exactly where we are. Like, dang, it's about to go down. Like, and I just think that sometimes when you just have the word on the page or in the audiobook or whatever, you lose the ability to be big and small because you are trying to be big and small, if that makes sense. Like sometimes writers are trying too hard.
Yeah, their self-consciousness becomes your self-consciousness.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right.
And you feel the kind of the creakiness between those, which is maybe also part of the reason why this book is overwhelming, because there were overwhelming in a good way for me, which is that I often found myself turning to pages and being like, I cannot fathom how you thought this one up.
Yeah.
I cannot fathom how you thought this was the image to go with here and how you broke it across the page and how this information is coming from here. Like, to me, it felt like very much being in the deep interior of somebody's mind. Like their id is on the next stool over in the bar, you know, like you're just in there, with them and their deep subterranean thoughts, as they're also telling you things that are completely normal and you should totally follow this because this is history.
Right.
But the undercurrent of all of it felt to me really like, I don't know, consciousness, you know what I mean? Just like this deep place.
Yeah. And what you were saying before about like this really huge scope and then also this really intimate family, what was very cool about the book is that the family was in the history. like they were very much living in the history. It's like I feel like, yeah, other people would be like, this was going on. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, but it was like, oh, this thing was going on and my parents were living in that exact moment. And I was on my mom's back in our little carrier, like walking through that exact field, or like she was able to find like the truth of her family's history and place it in the history of this war, of this moment. And like that was really fucking cool because you felt like you were just going along with the Bowie family, like here we are. Yeah. And I loved that because it also lent another layer of complexity to the history that for me I felt like I sort of knew, but it was like, oh right, like when we think about the Vietnam War, we think about people, but we don't actually think about people. Right. And like, I had this similar conversation with Clint Smith on the podcast because his book about slavery, we talked about like how we all know like Frederick Douglass, like Harriet Tubman and these extraordinary people who had been enslaved, but we don't talk about like the normal slave, right? Like we don't ever talk about like just like day-to-day life or like what that means and what that feels like. And like, we don't talk about, like we might talk about someone being whipped by an overseer, but we don't actually talk about what that does to like the 8-year-old kid who's called around to watch this moment, right? And then like, where does that kid go? Like, who's in their house with them? Like all of these other parts. And I felt like T's family was like that ordinary family, and not in a pejorative way, but like they represented just like people who lived in Vietnam at the time.
We're just trying to get by. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to return to that, but I also want to quickly say, if I could re-answer the president question, he doesn't get one book, he gets 3.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
It would have to be Heavy and Clint Smith's book and Somebody's Daughter. I feel like
that's a trio.
Right? That would be, like, if we could get, I know it's 3, but like, that would be enough context and history and scope for me to feel like you're not going to get away from this. You're not going to run from this. There's no corner that your brain can run to now where it can tell you that this didn't happen. We have sealed all the corners.
Yeah.
You now have to do with the humanity. Okay. So getting back to the book though, tell me about when on page, it's 267, you see for the first and only time.
Oh my gosh. Wait, I have a huge moment about these pictures.
Tell me.
Okay. So these are the pictures of T's family when they get to the refugee camp in Malaysia. Is that where they go? Yeah. So the first thing that popped into my mind was that recent article well, first of all, the first thing that happened is I was like, holy shit, everything's changed. Like I had it like kind of took my breath away moment. But then it reminded me of, I wish I'd looked it up, but there was an artist who had photoshopped like smiles onto Cambodian Khmer Rouge people.
Yep. I remember
people who had been not Khmer Rouge people who had become like refugees or who had become imprisoned by the Khmer Rouge. And it reminded me of that because you're building up to this moment in this book, and then you finally get these pictures, and the thought of a fucking person having the audacity to Photoshop smiles onto people who have been through so much and have had to leave their home and have like, it just like the fucking audacity. So it reminded me of that. But in the emotional moment of it was like whoa. These are humans. Like we've been seeing these illustrations, but this is someone's life. And like, it's a major moment. I stopped on it for a while and kept looking at them.
Right. Because the whole time, I think part of it is because the drawing is so emotional. You, in the course of reading this book, or I will speak for myself, in the course of reading the book, I thought I was understanding the full gravity. I was like, this is hard to take. Some of this is hard to understand. It's very beautiful. I'm in the flow. I get this. And then suddenly you get to these pictures of the real people who look exactly, by the way, like the drawings.
Exactly.
Like exactly. And it is so heartbreaking because you have, for me, what it let me know was like, oh, girl, you don't understand the beginning of this.
Right.
You're just reading a book. These are people. You're just reading a book and understanding a history for maybe the first time. These are people. This is the story of their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
and how their bodies got through this world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a major, like, wow moment for the
Yeah.
reader, like whether it's, reflective, whatever it is, but like it stops you in your tracks for sure. For sure. I mean, it's incredible. It's an incredible moment. We both have that note written down. I literally have refugee photos, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, it's definitely a putting the reader in their place.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
And I think like most books that are good have that moment, right? Like I just don't know that in every book it's so clear what that moment is. I think that's what's special.
A good point. Oh my God, I love that. I want to know what that point is for every book.
Right.
But I love that idea. You're right. There is a moment where we're right. It takes the observer who has so far been unobserved themselves.
Right.
And it just grabs them. And it's like, right. I see you too. You might be reading me, but I see you too.
Right. Yeah.
Funny how that happened. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to be right back. Valentine's Day is upon us and I've got love on the brain. Love for books. Duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, this is one of the things that I don't know which version of the book you have. I think my book version is like one of the newer ones. And there's an author's note that talks about what the title of the book was going to be. And it was The Refugee Reflex. And T decided not to use that because it sounded too much like acid reflux. And that's what they say. But it does come up in the book later when there's that fire in the family apartment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that basically T is like, I realized when everyone in my family was panicking because there was the fire downstairs, and I knew what to do and I knew how to handle this situation, and I stayed calm and got everyone out and all of this, that is this refugee reflex. And I found that moment to be sort of a smaller aha moment, if you will use my Oprahism, the aha moment. Let's go there. Well, I don't know what you thought about that.
That's such a good way to say that. I don't think I now that you say it that way, I'm like, that is exactly what that was. That is exactly what that was. I put it in the for me, so much of this was really just tracing the generational trauma. And so much of what it did was it gave me permission to also sort of understand my own generational trauma. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of say like, no, those are real stories too. Right.
Yeah.
And it was very helpful in the way that it kind of did that. But I guess I didn't quite put that moment the way. I really appreciate the way that you put it together, because I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's one of those things that makes me also kind of wonder, I feel like it sets us up for understanding where the writing came from. Do you know what I mean? Like, this
Say
is the
more,
moment.
say more.
Because something like that of being like, we're in the trauma and I could step outside of it.
Yes. Okay.
To do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you understand, like, oh, you're the person that can be both in the trauma and step outside of it.
Right.
This is the moment that you understood that thing about yourself, right?
Right.
And this is the moment that you became the kind of person that's going to write this kind of a book.
Right. And like, you're the person in the crisis that we all want to be close to.
Yes. I am not that person, by the way.
I'm not that. I discovered, unfortunately, in a very freak situation that I am not that person. And it was devastating to me because I sort of thought that I was that person. Someone had a seizure on a table at a coffee shop, and they fell on our table. And my husband is a doctor, and my husband was so good, like so fucking calm. And I froze, was so freaked out. And I still like beat myself up about how not who I thought that I was in that moment. Isn't that
But
weird?
he was there. But wait a minute. Let's take that back a minute. Because I find that so often if everyone around me is traumatized, I will untraumatize myself to fill in the gap.
Yeah.
Like, if nobody else can handle it, I'm definitely going to rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
But I would have done the same thing. If there would have been an actual doctor in that moment, I'd been like, you deal with this because I'm going to lose my mind.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But I hear you. I think that's true because sometimes when I'm on a plane, I have turbulence anxiety. And then sometimes I'll be sitting next to someone who has worse turbulence anxiety. And then I get really calm. And I'm like, it's okay. This is natural. This is showing that the plane is working. But if I'm by myself, I am like white knuckling the thing. Like, ah.
Can I tell you a crazy thing? So
yes.
I know how to fly. I grew up flying a small plane with my dad. At one point I was going to get my license. This is a very long, it sounds like a crazy story, but whatever. When I am on a plane and I have turbulence anxiety, like the one time that I looked at Jed and I was like, something is wrong with the plane.
Oh my God.
And he goes, what? And I was like, something is wrong with the plane. Something is going wrong with the plane. And he was like, you have to calm down. And right then they got on and they're like, our wheel is not retracting. We're making an emergency landing. Like they had a whole thing. Mm-mm. So now every time there's turbulence, he checks with me. He's like, is this something is wrong with the plane moment?
Oh my God. I need you to come with me everywhere I go. So you can tell me to come, like, it's normal, weirdo.
This is normal. This means we're all going to die. No,
that is oh my God, airplanes. But yes, T is the person you want with you in these moments because they're able to, I guess, be calm. And like, yeah. And the thing that is also like connected to the generational trauma part of that is that it feels like leading up to this moment, her parents had been those people and that was passed on, that reflex. Like they had gotten all the way through Vietnam, through Malaysia. They'd gotten through refugee camps. The mother had a freaking baby in a refugee camp. And then it's like, we've been in America for a while. We're getting older. Like, we have to pass this to you. Someone else needs to be the bearer of the refugee reflex.
Yes. Oh, such a great, I'm so glad that you found a book that told you about that, but also that you traced it back there, because I always felt like that was for me, I always read that moment as like, oh, this is when you became the writer. I see. But that it makes, I like it so much more in the context of I pass this down to you.
Right. I feel like also the other thing, like I'm half white, half black, and my immigrant side of my family is my white family. My black family's been here for I don't know how long, but a long time. We're Black American, like slave black. And I think that one of the things that I always not struggle with, but I always like think about is the difference between, you know, people of color who are immigrants to this country versus like Black Americans who have been here for a long time, and that. You know, one of like what you were talking about earlier is like, you know, sometimes parents of immigrants or first generation or whatever, they have fear about being creative or like having the time and the space to do that, as you were saying before. Yep. And I think for like Black Americans whose family was enslaved, like we've had so many generations in this country, even though we've been, you know, kicked around and killed and abused and legislated against. There isn't that same fear about creativity because this is our home and we don't feel in the same way as like as like, oh, there's this anxiety around that. And so I wonder for people whose families have come more recently, like what that will look like in the future when the children and the generations forward have that space and confidence to create here. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yes, I live in this place all the time because I'm actively, I mean, my job is working with students, right, and kind of actively pursuing in them the stories that were squished out of me. The ones that I was told were unattractive or didn't make sense, or that's not really a full story, that I recognize in them as like, no, that is a full story. That's a full story. That's your full story. You go with that. And at the same time, I see that, and I always want to write about this kind of moment that I feel acutely, which is both an incredible happiness about it and a real complexity around the sadness that it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
You know, like holding both of those things. Like I'm not saying it's easy to be a bisexual brown woman. It's so easy to be a bisexual brown woman today. But, you know, when I was growing up, it definitely wasn't. I knew what I was from the get-go. Right. I knew what I was from age 5. Right. Like the only time I ever didn't know what I was I sort of stopped talking about it from ages 12 to 16 because I understood how scary things were going to be for me. But really, after 16, I was like, nope, still right. This way. And I see now, I'm so thrilled to see the acceptance for the younger generation. And then there's also the me that is the girl that really would have wished for that. Mm-hmm. It really would have wished for that kind of love, that kind of even self-love, that kind of community, that kind of anybody right. to talk to. That I think like, what artist would I have been if I could have loved that part of myself sooner? Right.
Yeah. I think about that kind of like possibility often when I think about art. I mean, I went to theater school, so I've been thinking about art for a long time. Recently it's books, but it used to be, you know, on the stage or in film. And I think about like all the great stuff that people from different marginalized communities have created, like all the things that I love and feel passionately about and like bring so much to my life. And then I think about the possibility of what could have been had they not had doors slammed in their faces, or who the other people that they were in community with who didn't get their thing published or didn't get their thing made. Like, what is that art? And like, just all the things that we miss out on because of white supremacy and homophobia and, you know, ableism, whatever the ism-obia is. But like, there's no cap on what creativity can be. And so when I read a book like The Best We Could Do, and I see something in a totally new way that I thought that I knew and I understood, and the only real difference is that this person is telling the story differently and I'm seeing it in a different way, like that's really an incredible experience, because there's nothing new in this book, right? Like there's no new information about the war. There's no new information about what it is to have a complicated relationship with your parents. Like, but just the way that the story is told, it feels new and different. And like, that's like the miracle of creativity, right? Like that's like the gold mine, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like that's the thing. And so to like have it realized in any form, and sometimes it's like a sentence in a book, right? Like sometimes it's not the whole work. In this case, it is. And like, for me, you know, it hit on a lot of things that I care about and I'm interested in. And so that too helped me to feel it in a way that maybe I would have missed if it wasn't around, you know, this particular war or this particular, you know. And also Tia's lives in the Bay Area, which is where I'm from. Like, I could connect to this book and see the artistry and the storytelling in a way that was really, it's special. I don't know. That's such a boring word.
Wow. No, it's beautiful. I love that. I really love that. It's so funny because I just was giving this lecture today on revision, right? And trying to talk to writers about revision, which is such a dreadful word. And people kind of, they think of their like, you know, high school term paper when you think of revision. But I love revision because for me, it's the moment that the you that wanted to write this thing, because you always, when you want to write a thing, it's like a hum under your skin and you just head out for this territory because you feel it and you're like, I know this place, I'm going to get to this place. And then the crazy thing that happens is in the course of creating, you see it and it's like, none of this is magic. None of this looks good. This is not the magical place. But that's the art, right? The art is the distance between what you can actually do and the hum of your skin that propels you in the territory. So the art is how you meet that moment.
Yeah.
Right. The art is in that, in like what you're capable of. And so something like this becomes extraordinary because you can quite frankly see the movement of the watercolor across the page. You can see the freeing of her own kind of creative ambition across the page. And there's something really joyful about that in this story that's otherwise bound by, history and bound by relationships that might never make sense. There's something so wild about that.
Yeah. Oh, yes. This is like one very specific moment in the book where they talk about the Viet Cong being shot in the head, that famous photo, that Pulitzer Prize winning photo. And for me, again, I am deeply interested in this history. And so for me, that moment being kind of unpacked was another aha moment for me of like, holy shit.
Yep.
The ways that we distill the narratives of history, like, or the ways we distill like what happens in history for narrative's sake is, I think, fraught at best. But like that this image, another image that I think was in a book, I can't remember what book, but it was in another book we talked about on the show, was the starving child and the bird, the vulture that comes down, and the guy who took that picture that also won a Pulitzer. Yeah. And that is another kind of image where it's like we understand it as one thing, but we forget about like the complexity of everything around the image. Like, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but like it's not worth every word. Like you can't get it to tell the full story no matter what. And like that Viet Cong execution, and then the way that T drew it, and like I have like chills. I don't even know why, but I found that moment to be just like a kind of similar to the picture thing, as like you think but you have no fucking idea. Like this shit is like, this book could never explain it all. Nothing could ever explain it all. Like you kind of had to be there. And I guess it's sort of like akin to what's happening in America right now. Is like, if you wrote the history of America right now, you and I would be considered Americans, and we would be the bad guys too, because America's so fucked up right now. And like, there's a way more complicated story about what's going on in America that we understand and is like very clear to us. But in 50 years, Trump became president, period. That's the end of the sentence. Yep. So what does that say about you and I? And I think that like that moment, it's kind of breaking down that picture, was a reminder of like, not everybody was bad. Not everybody believed this. A lot of people believed a lot of different things. We talked about loving problematic white people and our families. And like, when you move 50 years away from that, what's that Ken Burns documentary, and like.
Absolutely. So, yes. And how do you look back on that time? How do you make sense of that time?
Right. And yeah. So that moment, like,
that's such a good comparison. And that photograph, I always think of that photograph because isn't that the photograph where the photographer ended up killing himself?
The bird one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bird one. He did.
Right. So there's also the peril of being the person who records any part of the story.
Right. And the person who did the Viet Cong photo wished that he hadn't won the Pulitzer because he knew the full story.
Yes. And it haunts you, right? It haunts you when your art, when the thing that you can do in the world becomes an agent of capturing damage. Right.
Yeah.
Like, what is that line that you're going to walk? And how do you do that? Okay. Which is, by the way, one more thing that I want to talk about in this book, which is I find so often one of the things that I am talking about with my, students and they often are asking me, how do I say the truth about my family when it will hurt my family? And there is something to me about this book that was so fearless, because she didn't throw anyone under a bus. It's not that, but the way in which she just let her parents be as distanced as they were, as disappointing as they were in cases, as human as they were, as resilient as they were, you know what I mean? As revolutionaries. She did all the things with them. And I think that's such a complex space for somebody coming from a marginalized community to write into, because so many times, with a book like this, that people are judging your family from this. Case in point, when I put out my book, there were a lot of people that were really upset that I talked about colorism, because they said that they felt like I had given Americans free license to be racist. And they're like, if you're saying that we are colorist, then you're admitting to them that we also have this problem. And I was like, if we're not talking about the problem, what are we talking about? Right.
And also, no one in America needs an excuse to be racist.
There you go. Exactly.
They're doing
it's not like somebody made them racist pie and was like, here, have some of this. And it was just so delicious. But I do love, there's a way in which, and I remember reading this for the first time and it really affecting me, where I thought, oh, she just let her parents be her parents. She didn't try to make them likable. She didn't try to make them relatable. And yet I love them because I know these parents. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, I know these parents. Mm. These parents, for me, that's part of, we talk about, like, what did you go into the book for? For me, it was the parental relationships, because I know what it is like to have parents that you can never really know.
Right. Well, that is sort of the last thing that I had that I really want to talk about, is sort of being a parent and being an adult child to a parent. Because I feel like that comes up in your book, and that definitely comes up in this book. And that's something I'm currently navigating as a new parent and an adult child. Yep. And I mean, I think it's on page 316 when she talks about how she called her mother by the name that her mother didn't want to be called by, because they preferred the Southern word ma, a jolly, bright sound. We insisted it fit her better. I wonder now how I would feel if my son did something like that to me. Call me mama. No, you are mommy.
Yeah.
And she says, having a child taught me certainly that I am not the center of the universe, but being a child, even a grown-up one, seems to me to be a lifetime pass for selfishness. It's something that I think a lot of people who are, even if you don't have children, just an adult child to a parent, that we struggle with, where it's like, I don't need your help, or I didn't ask for this, or I'm now, 35, leave me alone, back off. Yep. And that part was really interesting to me. And I had similar thinking about it. I read your book first, so I had similar thinking about it, but that kind of like crystallized a lot of the feelings. And I don't know, I'm just curious if that resonated with you at all, since you were so there for the parent relationship.
Yeah. And I really love when that section goes on, it says we hang resentment onto the things our parents did to us, or the things they didn't do to us. Right. And in my case, call them by the wrong name, just unpacking that moment. And I do think that one of the things that happens when you are a parent is that you suddenly kind of forgive your parents for a lot. Mm-hmm. Right. Instantly, like, there's a way in which you sort of rush, especially in the first couple of years, where you're like, it's fine. It's all fine. Who knows what this nightmare is? Right. You did the best you could. Papers over things for a number of years, and then it comes back. But I think there is this sort of profound realization of like, oh, I too will enact these traumas on my child. Mm-hmm. Right? I too will do this, and they too will not see me. Right. And that wasn't about the time and place we were in. That is about the parent and child relationship. Right. And so that is like, that thing traveled with us from one country to another, and it travels across generations. Right. And I always think this about my child. I've always thought, what do you do? Like, I think it must have been impossible for my father, I would say, who's very close to me as a child. Like, what did he do with the child who thought he was the sun and the moon, and was just always like on his side and trying to look like him? And I would even like try to like pretend I had a mustache, because he had a mustache, and I would be like, I would have one in a couple of years anyway. But anyway, like, you know what I mean? It was like this thing, like, I idolized him. What do you do with the gap between that child and then the 13-year-old who can kind of barely look at you, which is just a 13-year-old thing, but then the very complicated adult woman who is never as close to you as the little person was. Sure. Who like loves you, but like whatever. But it's like three different people. Right. You're having a relationship with three different people, and how do you capture what can kind of make that transition, and what you leave behind in each life as you go? Because it is another form of being a kind of emotional refugee. It is another form of being an immigrant to a new land. You lose that person every time.
Right. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I know. I'm like, my kids are 18 months. I hope that I haven't lost them already.
You definitely haven't. And also, I mean, one of the funny things, I said this to my son the other day, I was like, you're going to become an adult and you'll, of course, have to hate me for a while. And he goes, don't you know, Mom, like, that's not really the Gen Z thing.
Oh,
like,
good.
He's like, you kind of like your parents. I mean, I hear you kind of like your parents the whole way through, more or less, because like they're not doing the whole thing. I was like, wait, what is it? Tell me
You're
again.
Like, wait, I'm going to be okay. We're going to be friends. Well, I think about that too. Just like I know so many amazing people and I'm like, you're so creative. You're so smart. You're so talented. You're so this. And like, I'm like, our kids are all going to think we're fucking idiot corn dog losers. And like, that's so depressing because like your son has like such a cool mom, you know? And I'm like, if only these kids could know.
My son absolutely does not think he has a cool mom.
Right. And
for
like,
what it's worth.
And my dad and my parents were super fucking cool too, but I did not think they were cool. I now think they're cool because I understand actually who they were in time and place.
Yeah.
Like when I look back at history. But at the time I was like, these people are annoying and dumb. Turns out my parents were like really fucking fun, great hang, like awesome people. I had no clue.
Wow.
Yeah. But I
mean, you come from that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I come from really fucking cool people, but I hope my kids recognize that at some point. I know they're going to think I'm like a loser for a while because I talk about books. Like, they're going to be like, oh, my dad's a doctor. And my mom talks to people who write. My mom reads books for fun. Like, what an awesome person. But eventually they're going to think I'm cool again when they're like, oh, Jason Reynolds?
Exactly.
That's going to be like the moment when they find, hopefully Jason is still cool by then. I think he will be.
Jason is eternally cool. In what universe? I don't even want to be part of the universe in which Jason Reynolds would not be cool. Because what does that mean about the rest of us?
True. That's true.
He's such a like unequivocally lovely human. But, with my son, it's very funny because my partner is a filmmaker. And so I heard him once saying to somebody like, yeah, Dad's like got this cool job. He's and they're like, what does your mom do? And he goes, she's alone a lot.
No. That should go on your resume. Like, alone a lot. Good talk.
She seems lonely.
That's incredible. Oh my God. Okay.
The writer, she seems lonely. Anyway,
the last little thing. This is just basically the end of the episode where we talk about the title and the cover. Unless you had something else you wanted to add to what I had said.
No. Okay. Let's talk about the title and the cover.
Title and the cover. Basically, just thoughts, feelings. I don't know. I'll start, I guess.
Go. You're like, I have feelings.
I do have
feelings.
Let me go.
Yeah.
I'll start. I love the cover, the way that it looks. I think it's really beautiful. I love the drawing. I love little T like looking back at us with her baby brother in the belly. Like I love the whole thing. San Francisco. I see the bridges. I'm there. I actually don't care for the cover. I mean, the title. The title did not evoke anything in me. Like when you suggested the book and I looked at it and I was like, yeah, okay. Like I don't know. It just doesn't feel as specific and as like, it doesn't bring out anything to me in the way that the rest of the book does. Like, I don't think it carries the book for me.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go hand-to-hand combat with you.
Okay, go ahead.
Because for me, this is very much the Asian, like this to me was like the sentence of the Asian American immigrant experience. Like that is a thing I've heard from my parents so many times. And it's spoken and it's unspoken. Like it was the best we could do. It was the best we could do. It was just, it's sort of like a, whatever, it's kind of like, there were a lot of things that happened. There were a lot of ways in which you guys were broken. There was a lot of ways in which we had a rough entry into this country and we were scared all the time. And we didn't have enough money and things were weird. It was the best we could do.
Yeah.
There's kind of a like, and it's also, to me, I often hear that in the context of as a parent in a defensive mode, explaining why these gaps exist. And sort of, it's also just this thing of like, we did what we could. It might not have been the American ideal. It was never going to be the American ideal, but it was what we could do.
Yeah.
And so when I hear it in that, in a very sort of, in a way that feels to me like the first time I heard ayo, which is a South Indian sort of exclamation, when I heard that for the first time on Master of None, and I was like, oh my God, somebody put a finger on my actual heart.
Yeah.
Like I haven't heard someone say this before. So for me, it made a lot of sense as the kind of way to talk about both the way that parents understand the damage and immediately try to push it off onto like, let's forget that part.
I feel like you won the hand-to-hand combat because I'm sure you're right. It definitely fell in a place that's like, that's just not my experience, so it doesn't resonate with me. But I hear 1,000% what you're saying, that like for you, that's like part of your life, like that phrase. And it makes sense 1,000%. It just didn't grab me in the way because that's not, my experience. But
your thing. Totally. No, I feel you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did it. I think we talked about the book.
We did. I feel like, shouldn't we do this every
book we read, we should just get on the phone and talk. This is an open invitation. Mira, you're so incredible. Thank you so much for your time and your brain and sharing with us.
This was the most fun ever. Thank you so much for having me. I fully enjoyed this, and I'm down for any future reads. If you just want to talk, let's just talk.
Let's just talk. I'm down. Everybody else, we will see you in the stacks. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to Mira for being our guest. Also, a special thank you to Tam for helping coordinate this interview. Okay, drum roll, please. Our August book club pick is Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. It's sort of a young adult, new adult, romance, coming of age story that is so delicious. I'm so excited to talk about it. We will discuss the book on the show on Wednesday, August 25th, and you can tune in next week to find out who our guest will be. If you like what you hear, head to patreon.com/thestacks and consider joining the Stacks Pack. Please make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram, at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter, and check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. Sebastian Alcala is our sound editor and producer. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagira Gis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.